Okay, good evening and welcome everyone to the first Power Apps user group online session. Just quick introductions. My name is Jonathan Hart and I'm a technical architect working for Microsoft. So just some logistics, because this is our first virtual call. We are going to be learning a lot along the way, and we can see this being the new norm for the foreseeable future. So just please stay on mute unless you want to ask a question. If you are speaking for the first time, please just come off. Please just introduce yourself quickly. Just let us know who you are so we know who's speaking. And for those of you who are not comfortable coming off mute to ask any questions, please just put them into the chat window, and we do have people monitoring the chat, and we'll come back to you with an answer after that. Okay. We are recording this session as well. We're going to look at distributing it after the session, depending on how it turns out. So you will be able to look back through it as well. Okay. I just want to confirm that everyone can see my screen here and see me okay.
Yes.
Okay, perfect.
Yes.
Okay, so to start off, we've got our standard agenda. I'm going to be taking you through some new items that are coming through on the Power Platform. Then myself and Michael are going to take you through the crisis communication app that Microsoft has provided. What I'm going to be doing is taking you through what a standard deployment looks like from an admin perspective as well as from a user perspective. I've updated my app this morning, so it is the latest version, so you should see all the functionality that is currently available. Then after that, David is going to take us through Modal Dialog component that they've created, and then we'll finish off with any questions and general discussions at the end. Okay, so to start off in the news, some great new things coming. We've got geospatial features coming into Power Apps now. This is going to give us the ability to have interactive maps on our Power Apps. We've also got the ability to do address suggestions. So while a person is busy typing in an address, it can give them suggestions based on what they've typed. The maps are going to be more interactive than they have been in the past, and it is using Azure Map Services in the backend, but it's a nice, easy way for you to bring geospatial features into your applications. Another new feature that we're bringing in is mixed reality into Power Apps, bringing in 3D and 2D models to help improve your story, to help convey your message across correctly, to give people an understanding of what certain objects would look like in their real space. We are bringing in the ability to do volumetric measurements as well directly in the app. So if you do need to measure things out, you will be able to include these into your Power Apps as well. So this is really bringing a lot of great features into the platform. I keep pushing the wrong button, just give me a second. There we go. We're also announcing the public preview of the Power Apps mobile app, which will allow you to run both Canvas and model-driven apps on this application. So that's really cool that we'll be able to access model-driven apps from our mobile devices as well. We've introduced 15 new connectors. So in February, we passed 300 connectors available for the Power Platform. We introduced the new SAP ERP connector, as well as an update to the SQL Server connector, which now allows for Azure AD authentication. So in the past, you were passing through user credentials. Now you can allow users to access it using their own accounts. So they get access to only the information that they intended to see. From also sticking on Flow, we've also introducing the ability to enable approval workflows if you want to add a SharePoint site to a SharePoint hub. So it's very easy to create these directly from the SharePoint hub settings. And people can also join or create their own join process on their own sites if they want to from there. So before we move on to the
analyze it. Another example is
any other details or things in the news that anyone wants to share, anything else that they've heard of that's potentially coming? Michael, anything from your side? Monet?
Yeah, from my side, the only one that comes to mind is the Business Application Summit. That's changed to a completely virtual summit, and it looks now like it's free for access to anyone. So that's a 2-day conference online. I think it's the 6th and 7th of May, or the 7th and 8th of May. I can't remember exactly. And so that's just an awesome thing, because I think many of us weren't going to the US anyway, and so now we can all access it virtually. So that's great news.
Yeah, that is great. Awesome. Glad to hear that.
And sorry, Jonathan, and from my side, it's just there's an Apple Wave release of features that's being released now. So I would encourage everybody to just go and read up on that, and maybe make sure that you've opted in for the new feature, so that becomes available in your environment.
Perfect. Thanks, Monet. Yeah, like the geospatial features and the mixed reality features, those you can go sign up for the private preview if you are interested. Just go to the Power Apps blog site, and there's a section there for news and updates, and there's a link there directly. But what I'll do is I'll drop the links on our Meetup group as well. Okay. So with that, we're going to move on to the crisis communication template that Microsoft has created. We did touch on this last time briefly, but what we decided to do, we've had a couple of weeks dealing with customers who are rolling this out, so we know what works, what the challenges are. So what I'm going to take you through now is what a standard deployment looks like if you have everything available. And then what Michael's going to do is he's going to take you through some of the things you need to look out for, some of the requirements that you should have in place beforehand. And if you don't have those requirements in place, some of the workarounds or the way you could do things differently. So just a very quick background, we developed this Power Platform template, which helps communicate messages to your users inside your organization. So you would be able to communicate news to them quickly, be able to give them some tips, some tricks, some guidance, give them access to some links and various other features. And I'll show you what that looks like in a minute. So let me just swap over here quickly. Okay, so as you can see on my screen, there are two main applications that you end up deploying. You've got the standard user app, which is your crisis communication, and then you've got an administrator app. Now, before you deploy the crisis communication app, you need to run all the settings in the communication admin. Now, the thing behind this application is it's using a SharePoint list, well, a number of SharePoint lists in the backend to handle all the configuration. So you can go into that list and manually configure the settings. Is a bit of a pain. So what you would rather do is deploy the admin application and then configure all the settings inside there. So if we move on to what the admin app looks like, we've got our admin settings. And this is where we're going to do our admin email. This is important to configure because if people are sending requests, they're sending it to a mailbox. So what you would ideally do is set up your admin email as a shared mailbox. And then we'll set up the flows to monitor that mailbox for new messages coming in and action them after that. And I'll show you what that flow looks like shortly. You can go add a logo URL, AAD group name. This is for the notification. So when you are pushing out news to your company, it is using that group to distribute the news. So all members of that group have the ability to receive those notifications. You can also set up a process where people can automatically remove themselves from that group if they aren't interested, if you want to enable that feature as well. You're also going to attach this to a team that you've created inside your team's environment. You're going to link the channel ID and the name of the channel inside there. You're going to put a link to what your URL for your application is, and then you can go set up an RSS feed that users will be able to get the latest information on. You also have the ability to choose which notification you want to enable. If you want to notify people via Teams, send them an email, or even a push notification on the user's devices. Now, the one thing to remember, push notifications on devices was considered a premium feature, but we've removed this requirement for the use within this application for the time that we are dealing with the current COVID situation. So you can choose what your preferred method of communication is, and then you can go turn on the various features of the app. So if you want to allow users to share their status, they want to send a help request, share,
and you can have tabs,
wide news, tips, links, and FAQs. So once you've completed all of this, you can save it. That goes and effectively updates the SharePoint list. You can also go and add in any important company contacts. You can go group them. So you can see if I create a new contact, I can go set their name, email address, country, business phone, and comments. And you can deprecate other contacts if you want. That will remove them from the list. Now, let's go back one more. You've also got all your company news that you've published inside your organization. So if you want to go and create a new post, I can come in, new post. So let's just call this lockdown extension. Working from home. And then you can add a blurb. Now, when you are sending this out automatically, what it's going to do is it's going to give the title and then a blurb, especially when it's in Teams. And I'll show you what that looks like shortly. So you want the blurb to be something short description of the item that gets people interested. And if they want to read more, they can click through. So I'm just going to call this lockdown extended, and I can click save. And that's going to push out that notification to all the users inside that AAD.
COVID, or if you'd like to.
You can also come in and put in any helpful tips and any helpful links inside your organization, important sites, important contacts, and then frequently asked questions. You can come in and you can give a question a ranking, so how high they display in the list, give it a title, which is basically the question, and then what the answer is going to be. So once we've done that, let's move on to the actual application and have a look what that looks like, what the end users experience. So when they open up the app, it will have a picture, it will pull through their image from AAD. You can come in and share your status. So you can say, okay, I'm either going to be out of the office or I'm working from home. So I can select the one I want. So I'm going to say, okay, I'm working from home from the 15th to the 17th, 15th, 16th, and 17th. Submit. Now it's going to pull through my team members, people that I work with on a regular basis. So I'm going to choose 2 members or 3 members, and this is actually going to send them a notification saying I'm working from home during this time. And then it's also going to set an auto response on my email. You can go and update this, and you can choose if you want to reply to people outside of your organization as well. And you can go and hit submit. That's going to update your status. It's going to notify those people of that you are going to be working from home or you are going to be out of the office. Now, directly from here, we've also got a couple of buttons at the bottom. I can go to company news, and this is going to show me all the news articles. You can see it's just showing me the blurb in the first view. If I go in and read more, it's going to show me all the detail on that. You can also go to world news. This is from that RSS feed that we've uploaded, so you can choose which RSS feed you want to pull in, and you're able to read more, and this is going to link you directly to that item inside there. Helpful tips, we saw those configured earlier. Same with frequently asked questions. I can come in and type and search, especially if you have a long list of questions. Any helpful links inside the organization. emergency contacts, and then make a request. So I can come in and say, can I apply for leave during this period? What is the process? And I can go submit. So right now that is going and it's sitting inside a shared mailbox. I've got a flow that's going to pick that up and then send a notification to the Teams channel. So if we have a look at the flows that are involved in this, we've got one that's for deploying the SharePoint lists. This you only use while you are setting up the application. So this is going to go and create, I think it's like 8 or 9 lists inside a SharePoint site. It just makes it easier and more consistent if you do it this way around.
Sorry, Jonathan.
Yes.
Sorry to interrupt, man. We've got a question from the guys. They're saying your text is a little bit small. Is there any way that you could maybe just make the resolution a little bit?
Yeah, sure. Just
or
give me a second.
Or just zoom the browser.
Let me just try this quickly. Is that a bit better?
Yes, I think that is. Tian, are you happy with that?
Yeah, that's good. Thanks.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so yeah, as I was saying, the deploy SharePoint lists is just for the setup portion, and it just creates all the lists inside the SharePoint site that you're going to be using. The flow that notifies users of new company news that's in will be this one. So we can just have a look and see what this flow looks like. You can see it's looking for when a new item is posted in the SharePoint list. It goes and gets the admin settings of that, and it's going to bring some more items inside here, add a link to it, and then it's going to apply to each of these settings. So it's going to set group members, filter, and then send the notification from there. So we can just expand that, and that's going to be either in Teams or in email or push notification, depending what the admin setting is inside there. Okay. And then for the last one I want to touch on is the request flow, which I just initiated a request now. So if we have a look at it, it's looking for that shared mailbox. So we've set up a shared mailbox for this specifically. And then it's getting your team ID, channel ID. It's going to convert the HTML to text. It's going to convert the time zone to make sure it's in the right time zone. So this is important, is putting through the wrong time zone, possibly go and make sure that the destination time zone is correct, pulling through that user's profile, and then it's notifying the team of that request specifically. So you don't have to have someone monitoring that mailbox. It's going to send a notification directly to that team. So let's jump onto that team and have a look what that looks like. So in my team, I'm actually got the channel open. There we go. I can see that directly here. And if it was from another person, I would be able to initiate a chat directly from here with them, or I would be able to pop them an email. For the news notifications, you can see over here in the chat, I had a new notification from the Flowbot. I can see my new news inside there, and I can click read more. And what this does is it's going to open up the Crosses app, and it's going to deep link me directly to that news article. Okay. Now, if we go back, there's one last thing I want to show. You can also integrate this with Teams quite easily. You can see I've got my application over here. I click it, opens up directly in Teams, and it's readily available for the rest of my organization. So to add an app into Teams, just very quickly, if I've got the app over here, I can select it, add to Teams. That downloads a zip file. And then when you are in Teams, if you come to your apps control, you can go upload a custom app, upload for the company, select that zip file and add it in. Nice, quick and easy. And I think that's about it. Now, once again, this is a standard deployment. There are some hurdles, things you require. You need to have Office 365 mailboxes deployed. You need SharePoint Online. And I think Michael will go through the requirements that you would have and the workarounds if you don't have those in place. Michael, anything you want to add? You want to take over?
Yeah, cool. Thanks, Jonathan. To the COVID, thanks for sharing that. I turned on my video, so if it looks like I've just woken up, it's actually because I have. The great thing about lockdown is you can sleep all day. I don't know if anyone knows that, but no, just kidding. But you can look like an absolute mess, and then you suddenly realize you need to turn your video on, and so there we go. Okay, cool. So I am going to show you. I've called this Unpacking the Crisis app. Let me just share my desktop, and let me know when you can see the presentation.
Yeah, good.
Okay, cool beans. And so what I wanted to do is essentially just go through what many of organizations in South Africa who have been deploying this app, some of the challenges that they've been facing and some of the customizations that they've been making. And so I'll go through those and go into a little bit more detail. So I guess the first learning, just to note that the app does get updated. So it wasn't a once-off. Microsoft continually updates the app and also the documentation on how to install it. So initially the documentation was pretty, it wasn't very detailed, and now it's certainly very detailed, and it's giving optional steps and stuff like that. It reckons it'll take you 20 to 25 minutes to install the app. I think that's quite aggressive. It took me longer than that to initially install it and get it going. But certainly, even if you've got the app already, I'd certainly go back and look at the documentation associated to the app. The other thing that's
Michael,
important,
just to add to that, I deployed the app about 3 weeks ago in my environment, and I did the redeploy today. It still took me about 45 minutes just to do a redeploy of it, an update of it.
Okay, cool. And you're a guru, so if it takes a guru 45 minutes to deploy it, a mere mortal like me, 20 to 25 minutes is certainly not appropriate. So yeah, and as I said, the app's a sample. I think that's important to understand, and it's not just for COVID, right? It's a crisis communication application, communication between the organization and its employees, and the other way around, employees to the organization. So I think if you're going to go down this route, you also want to think further than just COVID or what is happening in South Africa at the moment, and then what might happen over the next 6 months, and take that into account. And I'll elaborate more on what I mean by that in a minute. The other thing to bear in mind is I've seen a few organizations trying to deploy this app, and they actually don't know what it's going to be used for, quite how it's going to be used. If you've seen the app, I mean, you saw Jonathan demo it, so now you have a sense of what it does if you haven't seen it before. So that's good. If you want minor modifications to the app, then take the app and customize it ever so slightly. But if you really want something that's quite different, then don't use this app. There's some cool learnings from this app for any Power App that you're going to go and build, and that's really cool. But if you need something quite different, then don't use this app at all. So yeah, I guess that's my key message there. You might build a Power App by yourself. So we've got a couple of organizations that I know of that have literally they just wanted a way for their different remote sites to capture in a central way the number of potential infections, the number of confirmed infections, what they're doing about it. And so they just built a custom Power App linking to a SharePoint list, so they didn't use this app. We've got, it's actually just using Microsoft Forms. So if you want, for example, employees to be able to maybe weekly submit some information so that you have a sense of the pulse of the organization and who needs help, etc. So we've got one very large organization. They just used Microsoft Form, and that allowed users to capture how ready they were to work remotely. So do they have a camera? What type of network connectivity do they have? Do they actually have a device they can use? Do they have restricted bandwidth? So literally just a form to capture that, and then they use Power BI to analyze it. Another example is maybe you want to capture the sense of how people are feeling. You know, I'm feeling scared, I'm feeling excited. I would like to be able to speak to you know, a professional that can help me with some emotional stuff. You know, I need help in this way. You can just use forms for that. You know, you don't need a complete Power App to solve that problem. The only thing I would say about forms is forms are great to capture a record, but not to re-edit the same record. So as long as you understand that as people are capturing this information and maybe asking them to capture it weekly, they're not going to edit the same record. They're essentially adding a new record. But you can get something going really quickly with Microsoft Forms. The other bonus of Forms is if you send out the form with an anonymous link, employees don't need to sign in. And one of the issues that we've been having with some of the organizations in South Africa who aren't on Office 365 or don't have Azure Active Directory, with Power Apps, they don't have that AD integration yet, so they don't actually have ways users can sign in. So to get something out really quickly, in some cases they're using Microsoft Forms anonymously, and then just the first two questions are what's your first name and what's your last name, or what's your employee number. And so that's a good way to get information from employees back to head office really quickly, and it works well on mobile phones and desktops and laptops and everything else. Yeah, so that's Microsoft Forms. The one that we actually use quite a lot at Microsoft is a SharePoint communication site. So this is communication from the organization down to employees. So we have a I open this up, I'm like, what on earth is Concur in a SharePoint communication site? Let me just quickly open one up. Let's see if I've got, yeah, so this is just a stock standard SharePoint communication site. It's really easy to edit, and you can have tabs here that you say, you know, what to do if you feel if you're feeling ill, if you feel between your commas or your semi that you have got COVID, or if you'd like to, you know, put up some frequently asked questions that people can ask. How does this affect leave? How does this affect travel? All that type of information you can actually put into a communication site, which also looks great on a mobile phone. I know there's the feature in this crisis app of adding news items, but actually a communication site is much richer for stuff like news. So certainly this is, for example, at Microsoft, we have a lot about, we've got a communication site. Also, people want to know, what are we doing for the community? What are we investing? How can employees contribute to helping during this crisis? That's all on a communication site. So, you know, don't forget the trusty old SharePoint and these beautiful sites that are automatically created for you. You just need to go and put in content. Screen or feature, you turn it off. Okay. Okay, so let's jump into the COVID, the crisis communication app. And I had a whole bunch of interesting learnings that I wanted to share with you, and then I'll go into the common customizations. The first one, actually, Jonathan already spoke about this, and that was is the emergence where they've got an admin app and a user app. The admin app writes config settings, and it actually writes the news articles, the posts, the contacts, etc., all into SharePoint. And then the user app reads them from SharePoint. So that's essentially how it works. So yeah, pretty cool. The admin app is obviously designed for, let's call it, the crisis communications team, the head office team. Maybe there's 10 people, 2 people, not sure. And that's designed for them. And then the user app is designed for all users, all employees in the organization to have on a mobile phone or on their PC. And so that's a nice model just in terms of how it works. The other thing about the user app is it's responsive. And what I mean by that is if you look at it on a big screen, you know, your laptop, It's pretty broad and wide, and if you look at it on a mobile phone, it refactors itself. And it's pretty clever how they do this. They have a few controls that they hide and show depending on the screen width or height. So it's pretty clever on the way that they do that. So that's a cool, interesting learning. It uses a lot of components. In fact, on the home page or the home screen, it's only components that are on there. So they use components a lot, which means it's reusable. And just the way that they use them is pretty smart. And then just a very specific one, which I learned, which was quite cool, is they use this function called concurrent on application start. And what that is that allows you, instead of running a whole bunch of steps sequentially, so one after each other, it runs them in parallel. So on application start, the application goes and gets a whole bunch of data from the SharePoint lists. But instead of first getting data from the first SharePoint list and then from the second SharePoint list, and then getting the user's data from Azure Active Directory, doing it sequentially, using the concurrent function, you do all those things in parallel. So it just is a performant way of doing things. And let me just quickly show you that. So here is that user app, and if I go into app on start, drop this down. How's this from a resolution perspective, by the way? Can you see this okay?
It's good.
Looks
Yeah.
good.
Yeah.
Okay, excellent. Cool, and you'll see the first keyword here is concurrent. So I open this, I'm like, what on earth is concurrent? So anyway, so you basically do concurrent, and then everything you put inside here in between your commas or your semicolons, it's going to run concurrently. So it's going to go and do this piece here where it sets a background variable to an image, and then it goes and sets some menu styles. So if you wanted to change the way the menus look from a color scheme perspective, you literally do it here. And then it's going to create another styles collection for navigation, etc., and off it goes and it does stuff. So it's doing all of these things in parallel. And just another interesting learning is, depending on what features you enable in the admin app, that's what decides whether you're going to get those buttons in the user app. So if you don't want the request screen or feature, you turn it off in the admin app, you'll see here it's seeing, is it enabled? And if it's enabled, then it adds that navigation item. And it does this for all of them. Is the emergency contacts feature enabled? If it's enabled, add it to the navigation collection, which is essentially these things down here. So if I just so if you don't like any of these features, you don't want emergency contacts or links, or you want to change company news actually with a link to the SharePoint communication site, then you can just go and turn this feature off in the admin app, and then these things will disappear, which is pretty cool. And you'll see the home screen only has components on it, that navigation item, and it does this. If I just work. Oh, that's a terrible picture. Let's get out of there. Okay. So let's look at the different things that 6 of them that people generally want to change around the app. So the first one is one we keep running into, where users don't have mailboxes in Office 365. So employees don't have mailboxes in Office 365. It's a requirement of the app that you do, but it's not listed in the documentation. And there's basically 3 parts of the app that users or expect, say, an employee to have a mailbox in Office 365. And the first one is when the employee hits the button called Send Request. And the other one is if an employee tries to notify others that they're working from home or somewhere else. And then the last one, employees try and set out of office through the app. So all 3 of those scenarios assume that the employee has a mailbox in Office 365. Let's assume they don't. Or you just don't want the app to work in this way, which is also quite fair. So make a request is a feature where an employee essentially can type a little message to head office, and it might be a question, it might be a comment, but you'll see the screen looks like this, and there's a little submit button. And if you look at the submit button, it calls Office 365 Outlook.send email. So it's trying to send email from the user's mailbox on behalf of the user. But if the user doesn't have a mailbox, this is never going to work. And so we've got to change this. And so the way that we have been changing it so far, in swapping the mailbox out for a SharePoint list. This is just one option. So usually, as I said, the app sends an email from the employee's mailbox, and it actually sends it to a catch-all mailbox, like, crisis@contoso.org, whatever it might be. And then you have another flow that listens to that catch-all mailbox and sends notifications to the head office's crisis team via Teams. So that's usually what it does. So an employee sends it to a mailbox, and then there's a flow that picks it up from a mailbox and sends it via Teams. So essentially just swap out mailbox for a SharePoint list. So it looks more like this. The Power App doesn't send a mail. It adds something into a SharePoint list. And then you have another flow that reads items out of that SharePoint list. So let's just have a quick look at what this might look like. If I go to the request screen and I look at the submit button here, I've changed this to call a flow. What's cool about calling a flow is now I abstract what I need to take place out of the application. And if I ever wanted to change it and do something other than, writing to a SharePoint list or whatever I want to do behind the scenes, I just go and edit the flow. I don't have to change the app. So now it's not sending a mail from my mailbox. It's sending it to a flow. So if I go and look at the flow, this is the flow here. And all that it's doing is writing an item to a SharePoint list. Okay. So when I hit a request, it's going to add it into my SharePoint list, which is here. So I created a custom SharePoint list. It's got a title column, a body. So that's essentially what the person typed in that little box. The status. So when someone first submits it to the list, it's maybe submitted. And when you pick it up through Flow and you post it somewhere, maybe you change that to closed or something else. It's up to you. And who the requester was, who actually submitted this request, so the employee. So I added a few columns. And that's pretty cool. So let's just test this out. And I have made some other changes to the app, so I really hope I haven't broken it, but you never know. I like to do things like that. So let's run this app. So let's say I need some help with my technology setup at home. Okay, I'm going to hit submit. Where's my SharePoint list? There it is. I refresh this. I should have a new item in the list. There it is. I need some help with my technology setup at home. And now I have a flow listening to this list and sending a message to Teams. So I've got another flow. And essentially, this is the flow that's also there by default, but the first item checks for mails in a shared mailbox. I changed that to, instead of checking items from a shared mailbox, to look when items are created in the SharePoint list. But otherwise, everything else is pretty much the same. And so whatever appears in the SharePoint list, it's then going to go and notify the team, the crisis corporation team, the head office team, through a Teams message. And so what should happen, if I go back to posts, there we go, it's there. I need some help with my technology setup at home. No mailbox required. Now, some of you might immediately be thinking, well, why do I have two flows? Why didn't I just from one flow write straight to Teams? And there's something interesting that I learned, is when you call a flow from a Power App, so when I click that button in the Power App to submit it, when you call flow from a Power App, the flow actually runs under the context of the person that's running the Power App, which means this user who's using the Power App, the employee, needs the ability to write to that team. So you need to give everyone in the entire organization permissions to create posts to this core business team, which is not what you want. So this is just for the head office. So that's why I have 2 flows. And then the second flow is running under the context of essentially a service account, and it's got permissions to write to this team. So that's why it's actually separated in that way. And I hope Jonathan and David are checking for any questions, if there are any. Okay, so I also changed the existing flow. This is what it used to look like. It used to check when a new email arrives. It now checks to see if there's a new SharePoint list item. And then, yes, I had to change a few other actions. For example, the conversion from HTML to text, it would have used the body of the mail, where now it just uses the body field from SharePoint list. So that's how that works. But there's 2 other places in the app that send email. The one is when you, and it's actually part of the same process. One is, you want to share with your team your status, and you're telling them that you're out of the office. When you click this share button over here, once again, it sends email. And I didn't actually build the demo here, but the same logic could apply. You could rather notify via Teams, put it into a SharePoint list, and then have another or put it in a SharePoint list and have a flow that picks it out of the SharePoint list and then sends it from a shared mailbox to every user if you wanted to send email to everyone. But the point is, it's not coming on behalf of the employee who sent it. So yeah, so that's good. The other thing that I've heard a lot of companies wanting to do is actually just take this feature out, especially at the moment. Telling people that you're working from home right now for many organizations is not that valuable because everyone is working from home. Not everyone, but in many organizations that is the case. And they're finding this feature just not being used. So you could just take this feature out totally. And the same with automatically setting your out of office, that you'll be working from home. Once again, you could just take this feature out if you don't have a mailbox in Office 365. To rework this so that it updates your on-premises mailbox is really going to be a whole lot of work you don't even want to go through. I wouldn't even recommend looking at that. So for me, I would just take this feature out, take it off. And there it is there. Now, the key, once you've done this and you've taken these these pieces of code out that send email, you also have to make sure you remove the connection out of the app. If I just go back to the actual crisis communication app, you'll see I no longer have a connection. Oh, I lie. This is a good example of, this is the admin app. Actually, it's not too bad example. So in the admin app, you'll see there's a connection to Outlook. Now, in my users app, I no longer have that. I took it out. And that's what you want to get to. You want to get to the point where you take it out, because even if you've removed it everywhere in code and you're not using it, if you have that connection still in the app, when a user tries to start the app, it's going to ask them to verify and authorize access to their mailbox. And if they don't have a mailbox in O365, it's going to break. So you need to get that connection absolutely out of there. Okay. Next one, number 2, change that you want to make. The app assumes that when head office sends a notification down to employees, an urgent notification, that you can only use one channel. So the admin app, you have to go and specify, how do you want to communicate to your employees? Is it via Teams, or is it via email, or is it via notifications? You can only choose one. And that's pretty limiting, because actually I want to notify my users on all mediums, right? So I want to notify them on Teams, email, and notification. Or maybe I want users to choose what they want to use to be notified on. So the way it works is it's essentially in the flow that sends out the notification. There's a switch and it looks at the admin setting. And it says, okay, if we've chosen to use Teams, it'll go down this middle path. If we've chosen to use mail, it'll go down this path, or push notifications to mobile devices, it'll use the third one. So it can only do those. And, once again, maybe a little bit limiting. So what you could do, if I just go back to my flows, you can edit that flow. So notify users of news. So that's the flow that the app ships with. That chooses one of 3 paths. I changed that. And so what it's going to do now is it's going to get all users out of an AD group. So these are all the users you want to send notifications to. So you have to add them to AD group. If you don't want Azure AD group, if you don't have them in an Azure AD group, then no one gets a notification. So it gets the Azure AD group, it gets the users out of it. And then for each member of that Azure AD group, it's going to do all 3. So it's going to send a push notification, it's going to send them an email, and it's going to post a message to them on Teams. So that's one way of doing it. There's a few different ways of doing this, but I just decided all 3. I could have changed this so that it read a list where a user has decided how they want to be notified. But that was just a simple way, literally taking them and copying these actions into one component instead of having them to go down only one of 3 paths. Okay, so we changed it to that. Okay, the third thing that, and especially this is more the larger organizations, is this concept of only sending notifications to users that are inside an Azure AD group can be a little limiting. One example of it being limiting is the Azure AD group won't, Power Apps, or sorry, Flow won't support you pulling more than 5,000 users out of an Azure AD group. So if you're a large organization, then those Azure AD groups actually not going to work at all. Well, it will only pull the first 5,000 as far as I recall. So that's a problem. The other thing is your flows can also time out if you have a huge number here as it loops through every single user in that group. So this could be a problem for larger organizations. And so essentially you can replace this and say, well, actually, I don't want to use an Azure AD group. I'm going to do stuff slightly differently. And there's a few options here. So the one option is, for example, for email, is instead of enumerating an Azure AD list and sending an email to each person, you could have a distribution list in your email platform and just send the email to the distribution list. And then you manage the members in the distribution list. That would be pretty straightforward to do if email is your primary communication. If you're going to send notifications down to mobile apps, that's slightly different. You can't use a DL. The other option is, once again, use a SharePoint list and rather extract users out of a SharePoint list instead of an Azure AD group. The nice thing about a SharePoint list is you could also have a feature in the app where users can sign up to be notified and which medium they want to be notified on. So you have a SharePoint list, which is essentially, let's say, the user's name or their email address, and then a column determining how they want to be notified, or 3 columns, email, Teams, mobile app notification, and then obviously you could have a form inside the app that allows them to choose how they want to be notified. So that would maybe be a better way of doing it. Okay, and then just really 2 simple other customizations. The one is, and I actually mentioned this earlier on, you don't want to be able to have employees notify people where you're working from. We assume right now it's out of the office. So literally in the admin app, you just turn it off. Share status, turn it off. But then you still need to, if the mailbox piece is an issue and you don't want users to have mailboxes in O365, you still have to actually go and remove the connection out of that user app. This just hides that navigation item from the app. So that's pretty easy. Just take that out. The other one is branding. There's 2 places where they have branding in the app. The one is the background image, and this is essentially, I think it's blue with what looks like a spider web. Oh, no, it's not a spider web. It's a map. Oh my goodness, whatever it is. That's just one giant image. So you can change that to something else. Essentially, you'll see there's a property called background image that gets set on each screen. And that's set to the variable var background, which is set on app start. So literally just go into App Start and change that to something else, and then that background image would change. And then the color scheme is set also in App Start. There's a few places where the color scheme is set for the app, so you can go and change those there.
Very cool. No questions so far. You seem to be doing a sterling job at explaining all of this.
Yes, and I see we've only got one person left, so I've bored everyone else right out of the call. So yeah, not too bad. I'm going to stop there. I think that gives you a good sense of the customizations that people are trying to do, and the other alternatives to using the app, like using SharePoint for communication, Forms for gathering data, and I mentioned briefly Power BI for analytics on top of it. But
Cool.
otherwise, I'm going to stop.
Perfect. Thanks, Michael. There was a question, does the background image have certain dimension requirements?
I did download the background image, and because it's designed to show on large screens, let's just do this, just to look at what it is currently. It's 1024 by 768. So yeah, if you just use the exact same size, you'll be good.
You could probably get away with any 16 by 9 image.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Thanks, Mike. Appreciate that. With that, David.
Sorry, may I ask a question on the branding?
Yes, please.
So we've got a bit of a unique challenge where internal to our rather large organization, certain areas have their own customized branding. And of course, as you can imagine, we have the brand police. And anything that we push out that doesn't have the appropriate branding on costs about 14 hours of very unpleasant discussion with the powers that be. Is there a way you could perhaps suggest running some sort of unique identifier driving a variable to inform the branding?
Yes. Yes, absolutely. And I'm so confident. I'm actually just going to do. I don't want to be able to pass to David because he's an excellent guy in this space. Yeah, I mean, I've got a few things. I often create demos for customers, and then I have to rebrand them for other customers. So I have come up with this model for fonts, font sizes, color schemes that are all put into app on start. And so if I ever have to change it, I'll just go and change it there. But certainly that, like this, I'm just thinking out loud here, like how this app uses, it reads all its config from a SharePoint list. There's nothing stopping you putting that branding actually in a SharePoint list or in CDS or somewhere else. And then when it loads, you could even depend on who the user is and what org they're part of or what business unit, just read that branding out of a different list or a different row in SharePoint. So there's a few things like that you can do. I know David's helped me a lot in this space before, so maybe he wants to add something.
Is that 14-hour discussions per department, or is it just once off and then it's over with?
That's per regiment of the brand police. So you must know this is not fun.
Okay, so then we have to fix it. So yeah, what you could typically do is have an Office 365 connector where you can see the Office 365 user connector, and then you can check your profile to see which division and department you're in, and then you can reference typically a SharePoint site or a list would be ideal for that, to go and fetch or a document library to go and fetch the image, and then you can display it in the app accordingly. Cool.
Okay, so you're almost like creating a theme.
Yes.
And then you just have these rows of different themes in a list in SharePoint. And then based on who the user is, you load the theme. So in app on start, it collects the theme.
Hi guys, sorry, it's Monet. I've got a different question though. I mean, is it just the theming that's going to change, or is it, for instance, the people that's also going to, receive the requests based on maybe divisions, those type of things as well? like what happens here is that you can request assistance and then it goes into a centralized Teams channel. Is that still one centralized team channel, or is that also different individuals per, business unit?
So in our business problem statement, we already have to segregate into different teams because of size, and yeah, again, so your escalations drive that way.
That's a good point, Mona.
Yeah, it might be easier to even deploy multiple of these apps.
Yeah, I was just about to suggest that, have a separate app for each division. It will be much easier to manage, I think, that way around.
Yeah, so I guess so it's depending if it's just a color scheme change, a theme change, a look and feel change that's you're not going to change the function of the app, then use this theming kind of concept. But if the app is fundamentally, the configuration is going to be quite different between different BUs, then you may actually have multiple instances of the app.
Yeah, I mean, when I deployed this app as well, some of the things that come up is, we've got multiple different regions, or even, we've got people that's in Durban and Cape Town and Joburg, and we want the app to, go to specific people and also perform differently per region as well. So those are some of the requests that we've seen as well. So that's maybe also something to take in consideration.
Yeah, that might feel like it's been in completely different environments, and then you just have dedicated instances for each division. Especially if your shared services departments don't really overlap a lot. So if your HR and IT in these departments don't overlap, then it'll make sense to have separate instances.
Yeah, especially when you start coming to you don't have one core business team, you have many, and they're going to handle with requests in their own different way, then that would make sense, yeah. Cool. Any other questions?
Michael, before you go, if you finish with your talk, can you please play the Windows XP shutdown sound? With that background, that'll just be awesome.
Color scheme is set. Also an app, David. On another day, I would have. Funny guy.
Thanks, Michael. Appreciate that. Okay, so David, over to you.
Cool. So let's get cracking here. Just figuring how to share all of this with the team. Okay. Can everybody see a presentation?
Yes.
All right, awesome. So just by manner of quick introduction, my name is David van Eden. I'm on a workplace director for Boomer Solutions. And we've been using a very specific pattern for model dialogues or pop-ups in Power Apps for a very long time. And we've been building this into a component for the past couple of months, and we're ready to release that. And that was actually released today. Of course, it's in public preview. I learned that from Microsoft. You just say it's in public preview, so there might be some issues, there might be some bugs. But the good news is it's free, and we're not planning to change the licensing model anytime soon. So let me quickly...
That's what they all say.
All right, and then so I just wanted to also mention Todd Baginski and Sancho Harker. If you guys don't know them, please go and follow them on the social streams. We reached out to them a while back, and they helped us to soundboard some of the concepts in the pop-up and to really polish it and make sure it's nice and ready for the launch. So I can really suggest you go and follow these guys. Then, so what is a pop-up? I think that, first of all, some people refer to it as a modal dialogue, others refer to it as a message box or a pop-up, or We'll be using these terms interchangeably because we're not quite sure what we want to call it either. But it's essentially something that pops up onto the screen and allows you to either just display information to the user, so that might be for just informational purposes.
And the other alternatives to
information from the user to ask if they are really sure they want to delete that file before you go and delete that. Well, the third one is you want to collect information from the user. So these might be in the forms of a normal text input, or it might be
using SharePoint for communication.
Text array where you want them to choose an option from a list or a people picker from an address book. So these are all of the kind of things that you typically want to do with a modal dialog or pop-up. All right, so how's that currently done? Now, the sad news is that it's not available in Power Apps, Canvas apps at the moment. So we've seen some really horrid stories with people trying to simulate a pop-up functionality. So typically you'll go and group a whole lot of controls on a screen, put them together, spend hours and hours styling it, making it look right, making it say the right things, putting the buttons in place to make sure that it does what it needs to. Then you have formulas to make it show and hide depending on certain criteria. So a pop-up can really, I know it sounds stupid, but a pop-up can take you a significant amount of time. And the bad news is if you then want another pop-up, typically you'll go and start from scratch. You'll go and maybe copy some of the elements, but you have to work on the styling and the positioning and the logic and all of these things behind each pop-up individually. So it's also extremely difficult to upgrade things. So if you've got 100 apps and each has its own sort of variant of a piece of pop-up functionality, the chances of going back and standardizing and updating that if you get a new way of doing it is very difficult. And there's also very little opportunity in that pattern to reuse any of the code. So this is the things that we hate. All of these things on this list we hate doing. We're very lazy, so we don't like to do the same thing twice, and we like to reuse code. So what we came up with is a generic modal dialog component, and this allows you to have a uniform design for all your pop-ups across all of your apps. So, and that's good because then your users also get to understand what to expect from these pop-ups. So when they interact with a new application you've launched, if there's pop-ups coming up, they understand what to do with these things and they understand what to behave. It's also very easy to then add the pop-up to new or existing applications. And we'll do a quick demo if we have time. I think we should. So we can show you how easy it is to really get going with this. And then you never have to worry about that again. If there's new versions of the pop-up released, you can also go back and very easily update the component in all of your apps, and then all of the applications will be able to make use of the new functionality in the pop-up. And then as a spin-off from all of those things, it allows you to consolidate your business logic, your rules, and your actions. And that's a very good thing. So if you've got an application with 50 pop-ups in it, and that sounds a lot, but large applications could have that number of pop-ups in them, your actions will typically be in one place. So if you update the component and you do it correctly, you'd never have to go back and touch any of your business logic again. So you can update the component and the business logic will understand how to talk to that component. So all of that is very good news. See, but how does it work, you might ask? So first of all, a button or a trigger or an action or something in the main application writes an instruction into a collection. Now, it's important to understand two things at this stage. One is the component and the Power App is actually completely separate. From a coding perspective and from a control and formula perspective, these things are very separate, and there are certain things that you can't do interchangeably between these two things. So you can't, for an example, set a variable in the main app directly from a component. So that's why we're using collections and not in and output parameters, because the parameters that you can create in the components, there are a lot of limitations around them. And with a collection, there's absolutely no restriction. So we pass the instructions and responses in a collection between the app and the component, And then the component, let's start from the beginning again. So the app would issue an instruction to the component and tell the component what kind of pop-up the user is looking for. Then the controls in that component is designed in such a way that they understand what that instruction means, sorry, and then it'll show and hide the relevant things accordingly. Then when the user actions the pop-up and selects the user from an address list or type in information, that information gets then written back into another collection, which then gets passed back to the main app. And that then sounds very complex. It's actually not that complex, and it's also very fast. I'll show you in a second that there's no delay in this, and you actually don't know that it's doing all of these things in the background. And then lastly, we've got a toggle. Now, if you haven't used toggles yet, they are amazing things that we use to consolidate code and functionality and business logic and rules and actions and all of these sort of things in a Power App. So with a toggle, you can have all of your formulas in a toggle, and that toggle can trigger certain actions anywhere in the application. It's not only relevant to the screen that it runs on. So then the toggle that we use then runs a switch statement to understand what should it do, and then it goes and performs the code block or executes the code block that you gave it. All right, so this is an example. I'll show you that now in live as well, so we don't need to worry about that too much. And so it's demo time. Let's see what this does. So everybody's still here. Everybody's still awake. If you have any questions, I think we're a small enough group that if you have any questions, please just jump in immediately.
Looks good, David. Well, you just stop sharing your screen, eh?
Correct. Yeah, I'm just sharing another screen.
Okay, there you go.
All right, awesome. All right, so this is just a demo app, so it's not a lot of functionality in it, but what I want to show you is how easy it is to now trigger these pop-ups. So first thing we're going to do is click on this button to send a picture to the manager, and if we click on this, it's going to say, are you sure you want to send this to your manager? And you can say yes or no. Click on no, it doesn't do anything at all. If you click on yes, it's now going to send an email, and it's going to write this this label. So this actually wrote a variable into the main app that just says that it's notified the manager. I don't know what's happening here. Don't worry about that too much for now. Now, using that exact same component, we're now going to bring up a rating control. So now we're asking the user to please rate the coffee in the office. So we can go and give it a 5. Again, if you cancel, it doesn't do anything. If you click on OK, it now comes back and it writes a variable with 5. Now, writing a variable doesn't sound that interesting, but it could have done anything at that stage. It's not that it's only restricted to executing a variable. It could have done absolutely anything that you could in Power Apps at the time of that toggle coming back. And now we're going to ask the person what are the parking preferences. So whether they would like a undercover or a motorbike or a bicycle cover or a parking arrangement. So it's going to say motorbike. And you'll see at this stage, it's also giving us a link at the bottom for a parking policy. And if they then click on this, that'll redirect them to another site or a URL. So that might be a policy on SharePoint. It could be a website. It could even be another Power App that they then refer to by clicking on this link. And absolutely everything that you see on the screen is generic. So if we go and set that to motorbike, you'll see that it comes back and then sets this variable over there. All right, so coming back into the app, just to show you how we're calling it. These are everything green is essentially comments, so you don't have to worry about that. Those are the boring things. Nobody reads that in any event. But essentially, this is the piece of formula that we need in order to launch that pop-up. So we'll see we populate a cool dialog instructions collection, and we're telling it we need a yes/no pop-up. We don't need any input types. The message that we want to display to the user is that. The source button is this, and that could be the actual name of the button that's calling it. And that becomes very useful when you have to start troubleshooting and diagnosing certain problems. Then you can also on the fly specify what icon you want to display. So this is now currently using a default, the information icon, and it's turning it orange red, but you can go and change this to whatever you like. So let's say, for example, you wanted to have cars picture for whatever reason. If I now go and call that same pop-up, so I'll get rid of that. You see it now has a car which is red in the pop-up, so it's very extremely dynamic and easy to use. I'll just go back into that. Then you'll see there are optional sections. So this is the input type configuration.
It reads all its
If you have any, this is where you can specify links, and then this is the response section. And this is what the toggle then understands what to do when the component comes back. So you'll see on this specific one, we're saying the response action is send pick to manager. And in the component, in the toggle, on check, is doing a simple switch statement. It says it must go and check what the response action is that it gets back. And if it is set pick to manager, which it is, then it should go and execute this set of formula. So there it checks, did the user click on yes? So it goes and checks if yes is in the dialog button pressed. If it is, generate this email and set that variable afterwards. Right, so any questions? This is what the component looks like. You'll see that the documentation is still a work in progress, where you'll be able to deploy this with in-app documentation. That's very easy to follow. And then you'll see that there is everything that makes all of this possible. So that's a normal gallery that goes and reads that information. It's got a few controls on it, and then we've got the buttons actually set up in the gallery as well. So it's very easy to add buttons if for whatever reason you want more options in your component. Right, so how do you get started on this, and where do you go? So if you go to aka.ms/powerapps-popup, it's going to redirect you to the component library on the Power Users site. Is everybody registered on powerusers.microsoft.com by now? That's very important. If you haven't done that yet, you're missing out on a great deal. There's a lot of cool stuff happening there. Right, so in this component gallery, we've done a bit of an introduction and then described the various pop-up types that you can get. So there's an OK, yes, no, cancel, and then there are 5 different input types. So you could have a normal text input, text array, Office 365 users, a rating, and a slider. Now, this list is sure to grow. We actually have a list of enhancements that we want to bring into the pop-up as well. So if you implement it in your apps, as soon as we release these enhancements, you can automatically benefit from all of that. So then we're just quickly running through the concept and how it works, and then we go through the installation steps. So I'm going to show you how to install it quickly. You'll see at the bottom there is the Canvas Power App Modal Dialog. You can go and download it directly from there. Depending if you're using component galleries on your environment, you then typically export the component and then create it into a component library. But for now, we're not going to have enough time to run through all of that. So what I'm going to do is just quickly import this to a demo environment. Start version 6. This is usually very fast. Bear with me. Okay, so I'm just going to select this as a new application and just say it's a demo and import it. So the application that you download has the component in it, but then it also has a way for you to quickly play around with every single kind of pop-up that you can get. And that helps you, it's pretty useful to get your head around how all of this fits together. So if I just open that, so similarly to the COVID app, the documentation is not quite where we would like it to be yet. We're working on it quite hard. So as soon as we release new versions, the documentation, a lot of it will be done in app. So it'll be very easy to follow. Oh, that's slow. So open that in Designer.
Sorry, David, while that's loading, if people require support, do they contact you guys directly, or is it on the site, or?
Yeah, so typically on the component gallery, you'll see you can add comments to this. So any questions or suggestions or problems that you have, you're more than welcome to come and load it here. We're also planning to publish this on GitHub, so there it'll be easy for you to log issues and get feedback on that as well.
Thank you.
Okay, so I've got no idea why this. All right, so in essence, this is what the app looks like. So it's just got some basic intro and contact information. And if you go to the demo screen, you'll see a list of columns and rows. So at the top, you'll see all of the confirmation type pop-ups. And then at the bottom, you've got all of your input types that's currently supported. So you've got your OK, yes, no, and yes, no, cancel. And here's a variation with a link. And here's a variation with a link as well as long text to just get an idea of what the component is going to do when it has to scroll. So this is the same app that we actually use to test the component when we work on it. So we thought to just release that with a component, so it's very easy for you guys to to get a handle on that as well. So there's the normal OK with the link at the bottom, and OK with the long text. So other input types, you've got an input text, so we can go and say, hello, Mike. And then we can write that into a variable text arrays. You can go and pass information to it and then select one of that. Then Office 365 users is like a normal gal. You can go and select a user, ratings, and then the slider, we can go and give it a score. So before the rating and the slider, you can dynamically pass the minimum and maximum values to the component, and then it'll display the relevant information. Right, so any questions?
That's epic, man. That's truly epic. That's a lot of work. Thank you. That'll make my life much easier.
Who's this? Sorry, man.
Sorry, it's Rod.
How's it, Rod? Okay, cool, man. Yeah, no, awesome. Glad you like it. So, yeah, please go and play with it. There are some small neglies that we're aware of. None of them are showstoppers at the moment, but we're constantly working to get this thing, to make sure the thing is absolutely bulletproof. In theory, the concept that this is using, we've been using for years. So we know the concept works. It's just in the specific way that this component works. We'd like to get it to as many users as possible, as soon as possible, so we can start getting feedback to really, enhance the functionality and then also just make it available to everybody. So you'll see that one of the next things that we're busy working on is in the Office 365 users. At the moment, it doesn't display images because this is using a combo box. One of the next things we're going to do is actually have a gallery. We'll have the pictures, the icon pictures, or the profile pictures for the users as well. And then we're also working on a pen input where you can throw a pop-up to the user and they can actually sign in the pop-up, click on OK, and then pass that content back to the main app. So yeah, I'm looking forward to, you'll see on the component gallery, it says, you know, built by the community for the community, and we're users. So the purpose of this, so for everybody to be able to benefit from this, because I know that there are a lot of people that are really struggling with pop-ups. It's an absolute nightmare if you have to go and create all of these things on your own.
It's very cool. David, what happens if I have like a smaller UI? So I've got a mobile phone type of UI. The pop-up will work fine on different screen sizes?
Yeah, absolutely. So if we go and say create a new app, I can actually just show you this and then you'll see how easy it is to incorporate into the app as well. So I'm going to use a phone layout. And this is a brand new app, so there's nothing pre-baked on this. So I'm going to go into components, import component. I'm going to use that component that I just imported now. You'll see immediately it now recognizes that it's using the Office 365 users connector. So it asks you to use. If you then want another pop-up, and the idea is with this implementation that you actually don't touch the component. The moment you need to modify anything in the component, it means that in future it's going to be difficult to upgrade it and each pop-up individually as possible, so you don't have to touch the extremely difficult to. So let me show you how to do this. On the main screen, we're going to go to Insert, Custom, and add the component under the Custom section. And you'll see now it's like sitting in a strange place on the screen. And all we need to go and do now, while we've got it selected, is go to height, change that to parent.height, go to width, change that to parent.width, and the parent function is very cool because it tells the component to look at the thing that it sits on top of. And in this case, you can see it on the hierarchy, it's sitting on the screen. So it's now automatically assuming the width and the height of the screen. And we are asking Microsoft very nicely to also give us a self. So you can have a parent and a self, so you can refer back to the same property. So Michael, I don't know if you can pull some strings on that side to make it happen. Right, so next thing, if you look at the documentation, you'll see that there are all of the steps that you need to follow. Basically, you now need to copy the toggle from the component into the main app. And if we go into the component, we see there is a TGL dialog response trigger, and then also a button with an example instruction. So we're going to copy both of those and just put it on the main screen. You'll see at the moment these buttons are now sitting on top of the component. We don't want to do that because the component needs to be able to cover them whenever it's visible. So we're going to right click on that and bring to front. And then we just want to set the visible property of that. So here is the visible property. So if we go into the app, go in there, go to visible, change that. And now you might say, but the pop-up isn't disappearing. So as soon as you've done that, you actually need to just save the app and restart it. So I'm just going to say demo app. And the reason for that is the toggle needs to register. It's an event on its own. So you need to reinstantiate the app in order for Power Apps to realize that it needs to adhere or it needs to feed certain information through to that toggle. Okay, so there is, where is my app now? What did I do with it?
You didn't create it in a different environment, eh?
No, I don't think so. I've seen this lately that it takes a few minutes to update. Now I doubt that I created it in a different environment. What I'm going to do It's happened to me earlier this week as well.
You just work too fast. I think that's the problem. You need to take life a little slower.
Right, so I'm just going to save this app. I need to try and remember what I called it. Demo app. You'll be surprised if it's that. Yeah, okay, cool. There's that. So now I'm just going to realize that it's there. No.
I was going to say, if that worked, that's an amazing trick.
Yeah.
It worked for me the other day, and I don't know if that was just a timing thing, just coincidence, but it usually takes a few minutes just to pick it up again. So I can't think of another way to speed that up. But anyway, so that was essentially the last bit of the installation. The next, if we open that app, everything should work just fine. Let me just close all of this. Okay. No, man, this is, sorry about this. Actually, don't know how to speed it up. Maybe try and log out and log back in.
Yeah, I don't think there is anything you can do to speed it up.
No. Can you still see my screen?
No.
Good, because it's embarrassing. Now, writing a variable, that's not that it's only restricted to.
It's there. It's there.
Yeah, it's there somewhere, hey?
Yeah.
It's a different
They
view.
don't expect people to close an app so quickly after creating it.
I think you made a mistake. They automatically deleted it on your behalf. All right, so.
Yeah, if you hit that little refresh button on the right there, will that do anything?
No, it doesn't. I've tried that.
Okay. It'll appear as soon as the call's over, right?
I'll send you a print screen on WhatsApp. All right, so sorry about that, everybody. I've never had this issue before, and then the last week I've had it once or twice. So I don't know if this is very interesting. Peculiar, I believe, is the word. All right, so I think any questions while we wait, or if anybody's still left on the call, because I know we've hit time. I like your background, Michael.
Thank you. I change it every few minutes. It's just to keep you guys on your toes. Yeah. I had the full BBC set going on behind me at one point, but that just became a little bit too formal. So
you see, now it is there. It is now. So now we're able to open it. There we go. Okay, so there you'll see there's no pop-up, and if you click on that, there's the pop-up, and it is correctly sized for the mobile device as well.
Brilliant. Love it. Love your guys'
really
work.
awesome.
It's amazing. Very
awesome,
cool.
guys. I'm very, very happy that I hope you'll find this useful. Give it a spin, take it for a drive. Let us know if there's any questions or suggestions. And then
Can you reshare the URL again, just on how to get it?
Yeah, sure. It's
aka.ms
/power apps pop-up.
Cool. Thanks,
Perfect.
David.
Thanks, David. Appreciate that.
Thanks,
That is
David.
really awesome, eh?
It's a pleasure. We're also planning to release a video. Hopefully we can release it tomorrow. And then it'll take you through the steps of installing it as well. If the guys don't feel like reading this, because I know people are going to open this and go, nah. So we're going to do
Yeah.
a video to install that as well.
Perfect. Okay, so
Awesome.
we are 5 minutes over, so I think let's wrap the call up there. Michael, unless there's some questions you still want to ask?
We'll save my questions for next time.
Okay, perfect. Well, with that, thank you for everyone for joining. Really appreciate you taking
There's the document.
some value in it. We will be sharing the recording once we've got everything organized, and we look forward to seeing you in the next one.
Awesome.
Excellent. Thank you very
Thanks,
much.
everyone.
Thanks
for
everyone.
joining.
Cheers,
Thank
guys.
you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.
I
Cheers.
love it. I was hoping you were going to do that.
Yeah.
Wasn't
Cheers,
me.
guys. It was me.
Bye-bye.